So far, you have learned multiple CSS layout techniques using these cheat sheets that I've given you so that you can create beautiful looking websites like, let's say, Quora.com, Facebook.com, Google.com, or any idea that you have in your mind. Now, one thing that I want to introduce to you in this video is that there are additional layout techniques in CSS that you can use to lay out these websites. And those techniques are called Flexbox and Grid. Now, before we get into that, I want to say that Flexbox, this CSS Flexbox technique and these different CSS properties of Flexbox were introduced in 2010, and CSS Grid was introduced in 2017. Now, before this time even, beautiful websites were made, and they were made with display block, display inline block, floating elements left and right, and those techniques that we have learned so far. So even without using Flexbox and Grid, making beautiful websites is possible. So with that said, we are not going to cover the Flexbox and Grid technique in this course in detail because it's going to take multiple lessons for me to explain those concepts to you. But I have a few guides for you. So with that said, the first guide that I want to recommend to you is on the Mozilla documentation, which is the basic concepts of Flexbox. So if you read through this documentation and follow along, and they have certain exercises as well, and you follow along, it's going to be very easy for you to understand these particular techniques. And for a cheat sheet on cssstrict.com, there's a very handy cheat sheet on different properties that the Flexbox technique in CSS has. So maybe they have something called order or display, or they have something called flex grow, flex direction, and so forth. So you can use it as a cheat sheet. The same goes for the grid technique. So there's a very good basic, very good explained guide on the Mozilla documentation. You can read along and follow along to understand how CSS grid technique works to lay out your pages. And similarly, CSS Trick has a very good cheat sheet, although they say over here the complete guide, but I really like the way they have laid out different properties as cheat sheets on what these different properties mean. So with that said, study these techniques if you are interested, but what I would recommend is do not study these techniques right now because you already know a lot to make websites. So what you should do is build multiple websites, build your projects, make it beautiful, and master or get comfortable with the techniques that you know so far. And once you're comfortable, then you can come to Flexbox and Grid and enhance your skills in these regard. So with that said, I'm going to talk to you in the next video.